Good evening. My name is Ezra Cleophas Poling, and I was an undertaker in the late 1800s. The funeral industry did not grow in popularity until the emergence of embalming became much more widely accepted by the public. As an undertaker, I would typically work in establishments where you would be able to purchase supplies such as household goods, furniture, upholstery, and china. My expertise was in cabinetry and woodworking, thus I was the one who built the caskets. The role of the undertaker continued to increase as the funeral process changed, specifically because of the technique of embalming becoming more and more improved. I actually have Abraham Lincoln to thank for my decision to become an undertaker. The assassinated president's body was taken on a train called the funeral train. The train passed through Rochester and actually went by Fairport and Penfield. It is said that there were thousands of mourners that stood along the side of the tracks paying their last respects with torches and bonfires until 3:20 in the morning as the train traveled on its way to Buffalo. I knew that I wanted to also pay my last respects and took a train to Buffalo to see the president's body. The body was taken off the train. It was put onto a magnificent glass carriage drawn by 6 white horses. The moment I saw his body, I knew that this was the calling for me. There are several thousand funeral homes in our nation today, and as some of you regrettably may know, it can be quite a lucrative business. My friends, I want to thank you this evening for your time, and please remember, any day above ground is a good day. Good night, and God bless.
I was known in life as Little Nellie, and I was the youngest newspaper publisher in the country when I took over the Penfield Extra from my father, L.K. Williams, in the year 1862. My father was the proprietor of a drugstore and tailor shop here in town. He was also a successful card player. In one card game, he won a printing press from Mr. Smith. Before I was 10 years old, my father's health became ill, and it was necessary for me to assist him in his drugstore. I would sit and distribute type for diversion, and when I was 11 years old, I printed a little newspaper, which was calculated only for our village people. But soon circulation increased to over 2,000 with subscribers from all over the country. I worked hard setting the type for the paper. Each letter had to be inserted individually. It was nothing like the computers you have today. The work was tedious and sometimes boring, but I was doing my part to help support our family. I also edited and mailed the papers. The only help I had was with operating the press itself. I just wasn't strong enough to perform that task. My dear mother left me before I was 8 years old in the kinds of my brothers and sisters at the M.E. Church, to which she was a member of at the time of her departure for a happier and better world. Her dying request was that I take the Bible as my guide, and one day I would meet my dear Ma in a place where trials and troubles are never known. I remember that very sad time and all of the necessary arrangements that needed to be tended to before we could lay her to rest. She was bathed, dressed by the sisters of the church, and set for display. A 24-hour wake would ensure that Ma was indeed dead and not in a sleeping coma. I had not believed that such a thing could happen until some time later I recall sending a story to press as editor of the Penfield Extra. This is a true story about a man named William White, who had been a soldier in the Union battle. He lay abed in his cabin in Pittsfield, Pennsylvania. His friends watched over him, plying him with nourishing food, knowing that he had been feeble since his return from the war, and hoping that they would be able to conquer his fever and build his strength. They kept his curtains pulled and the window shut tight, as was custom of the day, but White grew weaker. Finally, he lapsed into a sleeping coma and, after a while, appeared dead. No pulse could be felt. When a mirror was placed above his lip, no beads of moisture could be seen. His friends mourned his death and then proceeded to open the doors and windows, as was also custom of the day, and then had some lunch and refreshments before starting their task of preparing him for burial. Upon their arrival back to the room, a friend noticed that White looked different. When they checked more carefully, an eyelid fluttered. With the fresh air and sunshine, the man had revived. He overcame his near-death fever and lived for many years. The need for a wake was a routine occurrence, and I never doubted its necessity. So, Ma was bathed, dressed, and laid out in the front parlor in a pretty wooden box for family, neighbors to come by and pay their kindly respects. When the men entered, they would take off their hats with their left hand, smooth their hair out with their right hand, go up to the coffin, gaze down at Ma, make a crooked face, pass back up to the table, take a glass of punch or a cookie, and then proceed upon the plat in front of the house, where they would talk politics or the new road or compare crops until it was time to leave. All of the women stayed inside of the parlor and tended to the steady supply of food that accompanied each respectful guest. I, being under the age of 12, was dressed in white and wore a white bonnet trimmed in black. My father wore his dark suit with a black armband displayed clearly for all to see. When it was time for Ma to go, we carried her box out feet first through the front door. The only other time that this door was used was for holidays and weddings. We placed her box on top of a horse-drawn carriage, and then we walked together to the Oakwood Cemetery, solemnly singing hymns and prayers in which to bid Ma adieu. We carried her to a small plot of land and laid her to her eternal rest. I tell you this story not to depress your gentle spirits, but to simply share a piece of history. I have, after all, been reunited with my dear Ma, and my memories of my life in Penfield are cherished experiences which I have carried with me on into the next life. Our life on earth is but a speck in time. Our true life lies in the great divine. I am thankful for having walked in this solid state, but my spirit's home is at God's heavenly gate. I must go in. The fog is rising. Until my light doth shine again. Good night, one and all.